Yo guys, how you doing? It's Friday, it's another sunny Friday. I bought my special Figaro threads for you. Let's wait for a few people to get on here and then we can get talking. Ah, there we are. Oh god, I look bad in that jacket. Right, hold on, let's get it on there. Comment to let me know who you are. Hold on, it's still starting on this phone. How you doing, guys? Happy Friday. Thank you for coming along. I'll give you a rundown in a minute of all the things I've got planned for you. For us, rather. Just trying to wait for it to come live on this phone so you can all see it. There we go. Oh, Oscar, how are you doing? Ah, Prem. Do you know, I always say that. I always see your name, Prem, as Oscar and get it wrong. Hello, I'm on from Tacoma. The reason I'm looking like this today is because I've got this amazing jacket and I'm going to show it off for quite a few minutes. I'm not going to wear it for live, but for the demo. But check that out. How cool is that? Look at it. Handmade as well, with a silk inside. I told you I would come with some cool threads today, so I wore my shades as well. You know, we got this jacket with a car. We bought a car and somebody gave us this jacket with the car. They'd had it made. Some of you might have seen it before. I've forgotten off the top of my head the guy's name. But yeah, he gave us the jacket with the car and nobody else here wanted to wear it, but I'd wear it. They actually dared me to wear it with just my pants today, but I didn't want to put you through that, so I thought I'd wear it like this. Jennifer, hello, how are you? From Redmond in Washington, nice to see you today. Hello to everybody else that's on there, lovely to see you. Philip Parsons, hi Phil. Marios is our colleague, he'll be back next week. You know, we're getting back up to speed here, it's getting good, there's more cars out. That's why I've got more stuff to show you today. So I've got a sidekick today along with me to assist me and to help me show you. So we're going to be going through some mechanical bits. You guys seemed to really like last week when I talked about the bits that were a bit more technical to do with the rust and things like that. So this week I'm going to show you how I do an inspection, a mechanical inspection. So one of the things I've done loads and loads of is go out and buy cars and inspect them on people's drives and then buy them for restorations. And I managed to refine that and get it pretty good so that we were buying some good cars. Corey, hey from Florida, how you doing, my friend? Gregor, hello again. Thank you for coming back this week, mate. Joanne, hello from Vancouver. Wow. Patrick, how you doing? Patrick, I know you like fancy clothes. What do you think of this jacket then, mate? Look at that, all Figaros, all the colours on there. There's a few where the boot's gone a bit funny, but it's such a cool jacket. Silk, love it. Right, in a minute we'll get going. I'll give you a second for anyone else to come on and say hello, and then we will get cracking with these bits on the car. So yeah, I was just saying we're going to look at some engine failure stuff. I'm going to show you how I would do an inspection if this was a car I was going to buy. We talked about the rust last week, so you guys are on point with the rust and you got a good idea on how to spot that. And this week we'll do the mechanical stuff. Then I'm going to do a demonstration, hopefully it won't go wrong, of how to tune some of the faults out. And I've got all sorts of bits all over the place to show you how to do that. Then once we've done that, we're going to jump next door in here, and Lewis, who will hopefully be back by then, is going to show us some of the trim fitting. So I want to show you this because you don't often, you might see the cars stripped down or you see them completely together, but what you don't see is how to assemble all these bits of chrome. And there's such a huge difference between doing it well and doing it badly. It means whether it will last, whether the paint looks good, whether the paint will last, all of those types of things. So I'm going to show you some cool bits on those today. Just going to turn this radio off so that we haven't got that going on when we're in here. Good, good. Right, let's start with this engine stuff. Let's go back into the other workshop This is Lewis, guys. Lots of you met him before. He's going to be helping us in a minute. I'm lucky enough to have an expert assistant. Just take off this fantastic jacket. I feel like I should be going to dinner or something in this jacket. It's so cool though. Let me just have a quick look at the comments. Adrian, how are you doing? Sean from Atlanta, hello. Patrick, I would wear that jacket, no problem, looks amazing. Thank you, Patrick, you're the only person to say that. Everyone else laughed at me, especially when I put the glasses on as well, but I'm definitely keeping it and saving it for a special occasion. I'm going to hang it up on there. I think he said it was made, he had it made in India. Right, so I'm carrying an injury today as well. I fell off my bike stupidly. I was one of those people, annoying people that had to go into a minor injuries unit and get it checked. So, buying a Figaro, this is how I would do it for mechanical faults. Now, one of the things that is the most expensive to repair is the engine. We see lots of people in, we send engines all around the world, and it's much more favourable to be doing it to try and improve the car rather than that horrible feeling where everything goes wrong. And there are a few telltale signs that you can use to try and pick up. There's some preventative measures and there's some signs that you can pick up on. Now, when I go and inspect a Figaro, I always do it in a particular order. So I never look at the engine driving the car up the road. Basically it's about the sound of the engine, because you can tell the hours that are going to be left on that engine, because they all wear out in the end, by the sound of it. And there's a number of different sounds, so I'm going to try and get that across today. So if I turned up, I was going to buy this car today, I would always start it from cold, so you need to hear the car from cold every time. And I'd always stand like this outside the engine bay, because I want to be as close to the engine as I can. So this is the car that I was inspecting. I'm not sure how great the sound's going to be, but what I'm initially listening for is to try and sound the note of the engine, the actual sound of it. So the best way I can explain it is an engine that's in really good order. Make a comment if you can't hear me properly. If the engine's in really good order, it's going to sound more like a sewing machine. So the noise is going to be the metal parts moving together like that. So there's not going to be any sort of chatter. There's not going to be any clanging and knocking and anything like that. And that's really what you're looking for. An engine that is about to fail sounds pretty much like a big plastic bag full of metal spanners and somebody shaking it around. It's a mechanic's term is that car sounds like a bag of spanners. It's because that's what they sound like just before they're about to fail. But what you can do is you can hear whether they're how far on that spectrum they are. So this engine, it does have some noises that it shouldn't have, but we'll talk about those in a minute. But this engine's got really good health, because when you hear it, you can just hear that quiet hum, and when you rev it, the loudest sound is the whir of the turbocharger, that little whiny sound. And the turbocharger should have a whine to it, it should have a little bit of a whistle. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's about to fail. People often call us and say there's a whistle from the turbocharger when I go up the road. Does that mean the car's about to fail? And it doesn't necessarily mean that. Now, if yours has got a noise, so like a tick, 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 there's basically two things that can be. And it's what you're trying to work out at that point is it failure on the top part of the engine or the bottom part of the engine? So this is an engine that's just been built. This is a new engine that's ready to go out. The red cover, which is obviously this cover, has been taken off the engine. Now, if you've got noise from the top, you will be able to hear. If you need to, put your, just going to grab a screwdriver, put your ear to the top part of the engine and you'll be able to hear where the noise is coming from. So you can buy we use an actual stethoscope, which is a bit like a doctor's one, but a traditional mechanic would just do it with a long screwdriver. So you just literally would put this against the top and put your ear to the end of it, and then you'd move the end of this. The reason you use a long screwdriver is obviously so you can get it further down. You would move it around the engine to hear where the noise is coming from. And this is exactly the type of thing I'd be doing if I went to buy this car today for a restoration, because like when we looked at the rust last week, you really want to find the big bits. You want to find the stuff that's going to cost thousands of pounds. If you're inspecting a car on your drive, your own car, or you're going to buy one, it's the big things that you don't want to get caught out on. The fact whether you're going to have to change a gasket here and there isn't the end of the world. You don't want to have to spend thousands unless you know about it and negotiate that on the price. So if it's the top end, it's possibly going to be something that's adjustable and repairable, and we'll go through that, and in a minute I'll show you how to set these. These are called the rockers or the tappets. You will have read somewhere possibly, or heard us tell you, or someone else tell you there's something wrong with the tappets need resetting. So I'm going to explain what that is and how to do it. Now, if your noise is coming from the bottom, it's going to be more of a deeper sound, and it's probably going to be a little bit louder. If it's from the bottom, it's probably not going to be repairable. It's going to mean that the engine's got to come out, it's got to have new bearings in the bottom of the engine, because in the bottom of here, when the engine's moving, all of this is rotating, everything's spinning, and in the bottom you've got a long shaft all the way through the crankshaft, and it's spinning, and it's got bearings around the outside of it. Once those bearings are gone, you've pretty much got to take the engine apart and completely rebuild it. So if you've got noise that comes from the bottom end, then you have got a problem. If it's from the top, or if you're unsure, you can start by doing the bits in the rocker shaft. Also bear in mind that obviously you can listen right at the bottom of the engine as well. So if your noise is clearly coming from here and you put your head underneath and you can hear bang 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 from the bottom, you know it's in there. It's not going to be something straightforward. The chance of something being repairable in there is 1 in 100. Up here, you've got an 8 out of 10 chance of getting it right. So firstly, let's have a look at what goes wrong, because I've got that head over here on the bench but dismantled. Do pop any comments in, guys, because like I said, I'm hoping this is going to be okay for you. I know it's a bit technical, but when I asked last week you said you were happy with the technical stuff. So this is a bare head. So this is basically the head without the rocker shaft on it. So if you think about that engine that was over there, it looks pretty much the same, but you've got the little fingers, the little rockers on the top. Now, one of the reasons that we set tappets on the Figaro is because this shaft, which like I say would have the little fingers like you'll see in a minute, starts to come loose. These bolts start to stretch over time, as do these ones in the end, and it starts to lift up and it starts to wobble. At that stage, when it gets loose, one of two things happen. The shaft breaks in half, which is potentially repairable, or these bolts in these holes here that go into the head, see those, they screw into there, it's loose, and these shake around and they move just like that, just a tiny bit, and then eventually what happens is it makes that hole bigger and bigger and bigger, and then this other tiny little hole next to it, it eats into that hole. Now that hole there is what's called an oil gallery. So what's happening is oil is being squirted all around the engine, it's coming up through that hole, in through there, and then out through here, and it's spraying oil all over this, which is the camshaft running through the middle here. I was going to pull that out, but I don't think I will. So when it fails, there's a chance that it's going to cause loads of damage. If it rips all of that out, pretty much you've got to throw the whole head away, and then you need another head. So this is a head that we've rebuilt, a reconditioned one. So this one is ready to be sent out. Right, how do you prevent damage? How do you prevent having to buy another one of those? You fit a rocker shaft kit and you set the tappets. Now, lots of you have asked me about these. Andrew messaged me and asked me about these this week. Lots of other people have asked me. So I'm going to give you a crash course on how to set the tappets, how to do the valve gaps, and how to recondition this shaft so it's all ready to go. So, let me just grab a few tools. So the way you would do this is in the car. So you would lift the car on a jack. You don't have to lift it that high, but you need to take this wheel off. You would take this wheel off, take off the small plastic shield, which is just held on with a couple of bolts, and then your view would look something like this. You would have, there'd be a black plastic cover on there, but that's what you'd see under the wheel arches. So you'd see this wheel here, that's that at the top there. Okay? So literally, if this was, I'm going to make it simple. So if this was in position, this is the engine literally sitting here. The red cover would be here. That's how it looks in the car. There's the top of the cam belt here, this rubber thing. This is the cam belt. There's the top of the cam belt there. So you would take the wheel off, take the plastic covers off, which are just bolts that take them out. And the first thing you'd see is a big pulley on the bottom. And this pulley is the one that holds the other little drive belts on, and it sits here at the bottom. Now, you've still got this bolt at the bottom, and so you're able to spin it. Hopefully somebody will have marked up and put a little Tipex mark on here. That's generally what people do when they change the cam belt. If they haven't, you've got a small mark on the bottom of the crank pulley there, so a little dot that's etched in at the factory, and that's your point of reference. Now, the idea in setting the tappets is that the gap between the valve and the rocker arm, which is here, is set to a specific tolerance, because as the engine rotates, these bounce up and down. That's why they call them tappets, because they tap. They bounce up and down, and what they do is make the valves go up and down, and that's what makes the engine run correctly. When the gaps get out, these things are bouncing around and they're going much too high. They're jumping up in the air. So like if this one, I'll show you properly in a minute, but if this one is set a long way out, so if we just set it to an incorrect setting, it's bouncing around there, you can see. So if this went back in the car now, that would be the tap, 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 tap as the engine run. And if you ever run a car with none of the covers on, these little things look like they're just dancing around like little spiders going tick, 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 tick on the top. And that's what's happening every time the engine turns around. So the goal with setting the tappets is to adjust these to exactly the right measurement each time. And the part on a Figaro that's really important is to change, so these are the bolts that would have stretched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to change those to the correct, change those for new bolts so they're not stretched in. Okay, so setting the tappets, and this is a bit of a crash course, but just comment if you've got any other questions or any of it doesn't make sense. How often Pat says about the cam belt. Pat, we normally change it every 4 years or 50,000 miles, whichever arrives first, basically. Where you've got to be careful on a Figaro is people don't change them, because they say, well, the car's done 30,000 miles, but it's done 30,000 miles over 15 years, and so it does need changing. It should have been changed at 5 years. It's normally the years rather than the miles that come sooner with the Figaro. Just going back to what I've said over the past few weeks, the super important bit with Figaros, it's always rubber parts perishing. It's barely anything else. The reason loads of these bits fail is because they're cheap-ish rubber and it all starts to perish and crack, and when it's an important part, it makes it fail. Right, so you've taken your wheel off, you're in here, you've got the car held up on axle stands because your wheel's off, you pulled the cover off, you've gone in here, you've either taken your pulley out or your pulley's got a little mark on it. Now the way that these work is there's 2 positions on the engine. You can either set number 1, 2, 3 and 6, or 4, 5, 7 and 8. And the way that we number those is just literally, there's nothing written on them, it's just the way that we work it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 2 settings, like I say. You set one lot at position 1, 2, 3, 6, then you set the second lot. And the way that you do that is like this. If this is lined up at the bottom, that means the engine is on top dead center. If the engine's on top dead center, you can generally feel the tappets and feel which one is loose. So I can tell number 1 is moving a little bit, number 2 we loosened it off anyway, number 3 is I can feel it moving, number 4 is squidged down on the valve, there's nothing there, so we know it's not that one to set. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this one will, yeah, you might even be able to hear that just tapping on there. Then we have to set the specific gap, and the way that works is with one of these. This is called a feeler gauge. It is a thin piece of metal that is a specific width, and it's used for jobs in engines, so you can measure them, you can buy them online. Now the setting for this, and again, if any of our guys are watching, will you post these settings in the comments, and anyone else can contact us and ask them. So the settings are the inlet side of the engine, so this is the inlet side, it's got all the air coming in through this electronically controlled system here, and then the exhaust side is this side, it's got the turbocharger in the exhaust, that's how you work, that's how you reference it. Inlet side is 0.15 millimeters, and your feeler gauge should have one close to that, and the exhaust side is 0.26. So just to show you, so if I wanted to set this one that's now too loose, this feeler gauge is the 0.26, this is the exhaust one, the feeler gauge will have it written on it. I put the feeler gauge in at the bottom there, between the gap between the valve. I'm trying to do this with this cast thing on my arm, but we would screw that down until it was nice and tight. So we'd normally do them so, or I do them anyway, so you can just about move it. So it's tight, but you can just about feel it going backwards and forwards there. Then you've got an 11mm socket. I'd hold that in place because I don't want it to move at all, and then I would just nip this back up nice and tight on there, give that a final double check, and yeah, that's nice and tight. Little, you can hear it tapping. You always want a bit of movement, you don't want it locked in. It is a tappet, it's meant to tap, and that's that one set. So I then carry on and do 1, that's 2 I've just done, 3 and 6. Okay, now unlike other engines, now you've got to do the second set. And the way that we do that, if you come back round to this end, so you're going to have either your pulley on there, or you're going to have your crank pulley with your little dot on it. So you do a whole revolution of this, like this one. You can hear your engine's really tight because that's your compression. Pull this back round, get that back to the bottom there. Done one whole revolution at the bottom. Then we've got 4, 5, 7 and 8 left. So hopefully 1 is tight, 2 is tight, 3 is tight, 4, hopefully you can hear that, 5, that one, 6, we've already set it, 7 and 8. And then we would set those, we'd do those in the same way. Like I said, 0.26, we'd set those ones on the outside. If I need to set this one should already be set, so you can just about get the gauge in. He's got these ones set nice and tight because it's a new engine. Just get the gauge in. If I needed to tighten that one up a bit, I would just crack off the little locking nut, tighten that up a little bit and do it. But you want it about like this, so you can just about move that through. Once I'd set those, I'd make sure all of these other pieces were in place. Well, actually I'd put these in before the new nuts and bolts, because it will slightly move when you do that. But you'd have new nuts and bolts, and these little things called retainers are often missing, and the whole point of those is Nissan obviously installed these because they knew the bolts are going to shake undone and stretch and things. So the point of those is to stop everything from falling apart. But they obviously don't last so long, and quite often you take these apart and you find bits of retainer that have fallen in the bottom into here, and such a mess. So it's a nice exercise to get it all cleaned up anyway, and it's not actually that bad to do. I know it probably seems a little bit fiddly, and it is a little bit, but it's not too bad. It doesn't really take that long. Obviously you've got get your hands in there. The trickiest part probably is getting all this stuff here to spin, because while I've got it on the stand and I've got this spanner on the end of it, it's not too bad, but you can see I have to put quite a bit of pressure on there. You can see sometimes when I turn it, it's really stiff, and then it will suddenly free up, and that's the compression in the engine. If you actually film from up there, you see this is go that way. You can see when the engine's running, you can see the tappets there moving up and down. So that's what should be happening. And each one's dancing. Obviously, it's a lot faster when the engine's running. But yeah, that's what the tappets do. One of the Figaro's horrible bits. Yeah, Simon says so. The metal should get quieter as it expands. That's exactly right, Simon. And like I was just saying on this engine, that's the reason why this engine is particularly tight, because it's a new engine, so they'll do it really tight. There are hot and cold settings for the engine, but what I would say is with the age of the engine, I would probably recommend, I would maybe run it for 5 minutes so it's not too hot to Dutch, and do it at a sort of ambient room temperature and set it. If they're close enough, they're going to be fine. It's more important that you've got all the little clamps and the retainers all holding it all in place, really, because that's the bits that can typically make it fail. Hi Stuart, hi Alexi, I can see you watching. How you doing? Nice to see you, Alexi. You might have missed the jacket, but you'll have to see it when you go in on Monday. Sean Frisbee says your kits have all these parts. Yeah, we do. We sell them individually or as kits, Sean. You can either take yours off and have a look what you need. If we go back to the one on the bench, because you might not need everything. You might not need the little feet that go at the end, and the springs aren't actually available anyway that go in between, and you definitely won't need the actual rocker arms themselves, but you can just get a resecuring kit which has the bolts and the little retainers. It's important to note that these bits, the retainers, are just not usable. You put them on once. The trick with those, if we just go back and have a look at them on the engine, if you do fit them, thinking about it, the best trick with those, I think off the top of my head, this is a 12 or a 13 mil. If you just use a slightly bigger socket when you fit a new one of these, just crack the other one. All you need to do is just use a socket, put it on top, and just bang it with a hammer, and then it will jump straight into place. So literally, if I was going to put a new one on now, I'd put that on the top, locate it in place, put a socket over it, you know, like one like that, but slightly smaller, and then I'd hit the top of it and it would pop on. But those are definitely single use. If you try and reuse them, these little feet will just break off, fall inside the head, and then, like I said, you've got all these little oil galleries everywhere, and you might not immediately find a fault. You start it up and think, oh yeah, it sounds great, it's going to be fine, but it's not till you're flying down the motorway and it can't get the oil round quick enough that's when it fails. Quite often when we get these engines in and they failed, it is something that's blocked up the oil galleries, because like I was saying, when we looked at this and we're talking about the oil galleries, so if you look at the size of these holes, so this has to take, imagine how thick that oil is, this has to take the oil and then it has to squirt it over this camshaft to keep the thing running, keep it cool, and keep it from ripping itself apart. And so that's why it's super important to do servicing. I know what it's like when you're driving a car, you just think, well, I'll service it when something breaks, but you really, especially with an old car and a design as basic as this, you really are, by changing the oil, even if you're, you know, just changing the oil on the drive and you don't get a chance to change the filter, if you've got clean oil, it's got a much better chance of circulating and everything working out properly. Carl, hello mate, how are you? Carl's one of our colleagues. It's actually busier here this week. We're just starting to get back to it. We've got a few more people back next week. It's so exciting to be able to come in and see lots of people. It really is. It really is nice to be getting back to it a little bit. Right, so has anybody got any questions about tappets? I know they're a little bit of a fiddly one. but if anybody has, do just let me know, because I'm more than happy to answer them now. I think the questions come through a little bit later because they're always a bit delayed. So that's what I'd be checking for. Going back, we were checking this car on someone's drive, we're looking to buy it, or it's our own car and we want to be able to do a little bit of a check at home. So firstly, I'm listening for those knocking noises, those sounds. Then I'm going to move on and have a look at some of the other bits in the engine. So this is if you're, because I'm aware that, you know, when we get a car in here and we assess it and we get it ready for a potential restoration, you know, we'll spend a whole day on it. We'll take all the wheels off, we'll start taking panels off to go through it, and even then you can't spot everything. Even then you still don't know till you strip the paint off, you're going to find something else. But when you're buying them on people's driveway and you're, you know, it's half light, you've got hardly any tools or no tools, you've really got to be able to have those little bits just to spot it, because that's when you can really get caught out. I've met so many people, including myself, that have bought cars and then you find something horrible. So these bits are, this is why I thought these bits would be helpful for you. So firstly, I'd be looking for those noises in there, in the engine. I'd also be listening for any other noises, and in this engine you can hear that little sort of fart noise, and that's because it's got a leak from the manifold. So something like that is getting quite common. Probably not going to be a turbocharger failure, but it has slightly less of a whistle and slightly more of a like fart or balloon going down noise. And so I would be explaining to somebody that we would need to take that into account. There's probably a few £100 worth of repairs on there. Maybe the manifold's cracked or something. Not a deal breaker, but something that's reasonably important. I'd go through the fluids. Now again, on someone's drive, we're all in the same position there. Like I said, it's not, you know, like when we're here and we've got every tool, you know, I'll be doing these inspections when I haven't really got many options. So for the fluids, I'm looking at the condition of the fluids at this stage. So if it was this car and I would dip the oil, I'd just be looking at it and saying, well, it's not too bad, but it looks a bit, I mean, one, you've got that, can you see that tiny, tiny little white mark in it? So there's a little bit of water in the oil. That might just be some condensation, but it's not a good sign. If you take that out and it's milky looking, really milky, you probably want to walk away from the car, or if you already own the car, give someone a call and find out if there's anything else. But also just looking if it's black and horrible, because it gives you an indicator. You know, you go to buy a car and somebody says, yeah, we serviced it 3 months ago or a week ago, and you look at the oil and it's black like soot, then you know it probably hasn't, because that should be a nice golden colour. If you remember when we looked a few weeks ago, it should be nice clean golden brown, because that stuff is what's got to go through those tiny little galleries all the way through there. I'd look at the other fluids as well. So I'd always look at the power steering fluid. Good sign on this one, it's pretty full. And I would also look, it's really hard for you to see, but come around that side, I would always look at the top of the rack, because there's quite a big job here. You've got to sort of, you go from that side, you've got to sort of, you know, 400 or 500 quid job, I guess, on here. And what I'd be looking for there is, if you can, I don't know if you can see the end of the screwdriver or not, but where I am down there you go, the end of the screwdriver there, you're looking for loads of oil all over that, and that's the steering rack. So a good tip is, if there's loads of oil there and this pot here is empty, then there's a pretty high chance that you're going to have to put a steering rack in it. So that's a good one to budget for, or if you're buying the car, you need to negotiate against that point. I'd also look at the air conditioning, because again, that can get expensive. Normally if there's a failure, it's the air conditioning condenser or radiator, which is here. So you've got water radiator this side and air conditioning radiator there. And there's some really quick, easy tests you can do for that. So if you turn the air conditioning on, so you you film from here and I'll go from the other side. So firstly, you want to make sure it comes on, and what I'm initially looking for is to see the rev counter go up. So you turn the fan on, and then it needs to be set on cold, and then as you lift this up you should get a big clonk and that should move. So that's moved a little bit, but it didn't make a big clonk. So what that tells us is this fan has cut in. So you see the fan spinning, so we know the fan is working. But what it means is the system hasn't got any gas in it. Now, a couple of things that could be. Either it's just run low on gas, but these systems are actually really good. So typically at some point in its life, some stone or some bit of rust or something has gone in there and this air conditioning radiator has been punctured. The radiator itself, you could try and get a used one, but they're generally quite a high level of failure, and if you buy a new one, can't remember off the top of my head, but they're sort of 400 or 500 quid, which is about the price of a normal condenser. And so again, that's expensive. If you're looking at your own car at home, it's a pain in the arse when the weather gets really nice, but you might just be happy to have the roof down. But if you're out on someone's drive and you're looking to buy one, then it's definitely a negotiating point because it's an expensive fix. It's pretty rare, to be honest, that you just top them up. Sometimes you can. Another good tip for that as well, you top the gas up here and here when it goes to the garage. This is not available in this country. In the US, you guys have got what's called R12, which is what this runs on. But in this country, they don't have that gas. So you have to convert the system, and you buy a little converter that goes on there, so it's a different connection. It's just useful to know though, if I looked at a car like this, I'd think, well, it's in this country, it's in the UK, it's never had the valves, so nobody's ever even attempted to fill it up with gas. It's all looking pretty old. I would probably say sort of 80-20, 80% chance this is going to be a leak in the system, 20% chance you might just fill it up and it works. If you fill it up and it works, you're going to spend, I don't know, 50 quid or something, I guess it is, maybe a little bit more than that. But yeah, the other thing you can do is look through the radiator. Occasionally you can actually see the leak, because although it's gas, it's mixed with oil as well, and sometimes you can see in the back of there the oil leaking out. Right, so the other things that I would look for, I would definitely look, if I was just inspecting this car, I would look for smoke, because that's the turbocharger. So this car's cold start up. We just started it now when we did this video. Let me just turn this off. The thing. So yeah, this car is fine unless you've got big plumes of blue smoke, because that generally indicates the turbocharger is starting to fail. But if it was, it would fill this workshop up and you'd almost have like a taste in your mouth. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. One of the things that is worth saying is that whenever I buy a Figaro, I might go to the end of the road and back, but really it's about visual inspection. So if you are looking to buy one, or even looking at yours, I would barely even sit in the car to do it. I'd have a quick glance at what was going on in the inside, but really I'm doing it from the outside. Teddy B says it's easier to look at the back of the dipstick. Teddy, that is a great tip. You are quite right. The front of the dipstick is rubbish, and when you turn it to the back you can actually see it pretty well. Eddie says, can you mention about replacing the engine oil sump gasket? Yeah, so Eddie, one of the other bits that I would definitely be checking is for major oil leaks, because it can get quite timely to do them. Let me see with my club hand if I can show you how to do this on the sump. So what Eddie's talking about is the sump, which is this part of the engine. So if we've got no noises coming from there, but we've got leaks, then that might be something we'd look at. You would have to stick your head underneath. If I do an inspection on a driveway, I generally don't take any tools. I might have a floor mat out the car if it's somewhere dirty so I can kneel on the floor mat. But you can generally sort of get underneath and get a little bit of an idea of what's going on. If you look, I'm not sure how well you can see, if you can see my arms. If you look on this one, you can see the bottom of the sump, which is there, is pretty dry on this car, so it hasn't got a sump gasket failure. It has got oil all over the top, which is partly where it's been topped up, but I imagine that rocker cover's all leaking anyway. So part of doing that rocker shaft, you change the rubber gasket that went around there as well. But anyway, if it did have leaks from the sump, you'd want to change the gasket there. Now, obviously, we have the luxury of having this on the stand. If you were trying, and it's nice and shiny and clean and painted. If you were doing this on the floor, it's a messy job because you've got to take part of the exhaust out the way. It's just nuts and bolts. There's nothing complicated, but it's just a bit fiddly. I think off the top of my head, it's about 3 hours once you get, you know, so it might take you, if you're doing it for the first time, 6 hours maybe. Anyway, the sump is really straightforward. All it is just literally 10mm bolts, 16 of them, is it? 4, 7, 14 of them, all the way around. You just unbolt them. One of the interesting things about that though is just to make sure that you the way that you seal it. So it's a common mistake that you go out and buy a gasket for a Nissan Micro sump which is not exactly the same and think that it fits. The way that this works is it has what's called a half moon gasket that fits in there, and then you put sealer around the outside. There is no gasket along here. If you try and use one, it will leak, and often we get these in and they've been put together using micro parts and it all starts to fall apart at the edges and there's oil going everywhere. So the way they've done this is the correct way, and yeah, it'll have a rubber gasket in there and you put the gasket on and squeeze it together. A good tip is when you put those little half moon gaskets in, you put the sealer on the half moon gasket, hold that in place so it sticks it in place, and then you do the sump up and it pulls it all together. If one of my guys is on, can you post the name of the stuff we use? There's a particular brand of sealer that we use for that. Simon says the gas is the R134. I'm not sure if that's an older comment when we were talking about the aircon, but yeah, that's right, Simon. So the one that it gets updated to here is called 134A. So I would have done some oil checks, would have done those bits, would have probably gone just to the end of the road and back. If I went to the end of the road and back when I was buying it, I would only really be looking at two things. Is the turbocharger working? So are we getting a whistle and are we getting that whoom as it pulls away? A Figaro should be just as nippy as any other car. We've often, many times, I've met people over the years and I've got to drive their car and realise that the turbocharger doesn't work, and they just assumed it was always that slow. But when you would know, I mean, a Figaro might be slow over 50-60 miles an hour, but it's still got loads of punch when you put your foot down. If yours is painfully slow and you're getting overtaken by lorries coming off roundabouts and things like that, you might want to get someone to have a look at it. The turbocharger might be just starting to fail on it. The other thing that I would just be doing if I drove it up the road was just make sure it went through the gears. You've only got 3-speed automatic. You can hear it and see it on the rev counter. 1, 2, 3 as the rev counter as it changes gear. It's worth noting that every Figaro does scream when it gets to 50 mile an hour or over, and sounds like, there's an article somewhere that says they sound like a swarm of bees, which is pretty true, which is why we talked the other week about doing a conversion on them. So that is the inspection of the engine and the tappets. I hope that wasn't too technical. Give me some comments. Should we have a look at putting some pretty trim on a pink Figaro, because that might be a bit more fun, unless anyone else has got any questions around this. I have a feeling though I might have lost comments for a minute. Let's just see. Olivier, hello. Chris, how are you doing, Chris? Mileage, cars covering 600 to 800 miles per year. So yeah, I think if you go back to the cam belt comments, Chris, just about the the time in the cam belt. So let's have a little look next door. Keep going if you've got any other questions, guys. I'm always happy to hear them. So this is the Figaro. I don't know if you remember, but a few weeks ago when we were talking about something on a Friday, we had this lovely car and we looked at it in the oven being painted. And pink cars are always nice, aren't they? It doesn't matter whether you actually want a pink car or not. You can't help but smile when you look at them. I always think they look like ice cream, you know? Always makes me want to eat them or lick them. Anyway, there we go. I thought it would be interesting to look at this because one, these boxes are full of everything to put in this Figaro and it hasn't even been fully stripped down. And two, we're getting some of the bits in today. And one of the things that is quite interesting is the way that the trim goes on the car. Now, you can see when you look at paintwork, what you're really looking at is the reflection of the paintwork in the light. And you can see here, you might have to move the camera around a bit, but you've got the reflection of the lights. That's why we have all these straight lights in body shops and workshops. And you can see it's nice and straight all the way down the side of the car. What tends to happen is all around these holes where the trim goes in, you get little dents and buckles, and it's really tricky to get these all correct again and get them back in the right spots. And so the guys would have spent weeks prepping this before prepping it before painting it, so that this is all nice and smooth, so that when the trim goes back on and you look at the car down the side, you've got that nice mirrored finish. What we're looking for is the reflections of the sky and the cars and bits in it. You want it to look like a mirror. That's the goal, really. And the more time you spend on the paintwork, the more you'll get that. Also, the longer it will last as well. You'll spend, you know, a really good paint job will last years and years and years and years, and a bad one will last weeks. So, trim. Louis, should we have a look at this trim?
Yeah, I've got some down here.
Brilliant. Which one are we going to do? So this is Lewis, guys. I know I introduced him before, but you weren't all on here.
So, yeah, rear quarter trim.
Yeah, so this is the rear quarter. This is the one on the back of the car, isn't it? And these ones are always buckled and nasty, and they're a pain to get off as well. So do you want to just show them how you get it off? Because the other thing is, when these have been stripped off, there's normally loads of damage to the car. So this would sit on there. So before we started this project, we would have stripped all of this off. I can just hold the end of it if you want.
Yeah, just lining up the first.
So before this car would have been painted, all of these bits would have been stripped off, and it's really key that you get this process right. You can cause so much damage doing this properly, not doing this properly rather. Go on, mate. So you can see Louis will use these two plastic trims. So he's using plastic tools. That's really important. If you just put a screwdriver under these and start to wedge them off, you're going to damage them. And we've seen so many people over the years that have their cars brought in that have been stripped down from somebody that doesn't know what the trim looks like underneath, because if you don't know, you don't know where the attachment is.
So just got two wedges. And we've got the moulding raised up a little bit, usually a bit tighter down, but all we do is just tap them up and then the little clip will let go. Just make sure that the wedges are either side of the clip, because if you have them too far apart, you'll bend the moulding in the middle. So yeah, you just, I think the other one was here, wasn't it? So you just lock it underneath, put the other one in, and then just ease it up. You don't need to put too much pressure on it.
So when that would be coming off the first time, so when Lewis would have stripped this car originally, they would have been a lot tougher to get off. They would have been, they're tough, aren't they? You've got to work your way carefully along them, because what you don't want to happen, if this trim ends up like a banana, one, you can't buy it new. If you can get it used, it's really expensive, and it's going to have lots of dents in it. So what Lewis or one of us would have done to this is basically beat all the dents back out of it that somebody's put in it over 25 years. So we would have taken it out, put it on the bench, any of these bits on the back would have tapped them back out, then he would have rubbed it down, then he would have polished it, and you know, we can spend 2 or 3 days just going around cleaning the chrome up, and that doesn't include the time to take them off the car. But yeah, now you're ready for reassembly. What would you do from here?
So I'll check to see if any of these clips here are missing. As you can see, we've got 3 here that are missing.
They break as well, don't they?
They do. They some of them do break and they fall inside the car.
Yeah, yeah.
So then we obviously got some new ones, so we'll just pop those in like that. And that. So then we're ready to go with a full set of clips, and then we'll get the mould in. And what's really important, I would say, is when you're offering it up, make sure that all these little feet are in line. I don't know if you can get that. If so, if they're not, just literally like this, just slide them across. You can move them about. And what I usually do is just get it started on like a first click. Ooh. We haven't gone all the way yet, because if we've got to take it back off, it's easier to do it at this stage. Line that one up. And that one. And then once we're happy with where it's going to go and it all lines up at the back with a screw hole here, and then up at the front with the door, once we're happy.
So that's important, isn't it, Lewis? You
Yeah.
can get, if you get that out, what Louis is talking about there, that overhangs the door, and once you clipped it all in, you won't be able to move it.
So you just get it sort of level, just slightly back from the quarter when you're ready. Not too hard. Then we'll fit the screw and a little clip.
The advantage with that, guys, is now that trim is it's not gonna come off, and you can see how beautiful and sharp we're talking along here. You've got no little dents along there. It's lovely and sharp. You've got this nice black against the pink of the car. If the black is gone on yours, we can supply this rubber now. We've reproduced it. But it is worth bearing in mind that you take everything off to do it. So there's a how-to guide on how to do it. But obviously you're taking all of the chrome off, replacing all that black. So it's a big job, but that's how you get these beautiful sharp lines.
I haven't test fitted this clip, so it might need a bit of adjustment. Just make sure that's nice and straight. And this one is full of all dirt, but hopefully we'll clip it. And that's the
So you can see what we've got there as well is this beautiful line. There's no gap. If these are bent, you get a gap between the body here, and you can like catch it in the light. And this one's gone together really well, actually. Sometimes it can take a long time just working the bits of metal and trying to get those into place, but yeah, Lewis and the other guys that put these together have done many of them, so you can see how nicely they go in, and they've just got the right amount of pressure to get them in. Because again, as well as grunting them on the way out, you can grunt them on the way in, and all of a sudden you've got a dent in the body, and then you're either going to repair the dent or you're gonna live with it. And if you put hundreds of hours into something, you want it to be sharp. So the other ones are similar, aren't they? The front one's not, but the door one.
The doors are similar to the quarter mouldings. The only ones that are different are the wings, which I did have one. Which are the wing ones, and they are. You have to remove the scuttle panel. Toby, if you give me a hand.
Yeah.
So, got it. And then you'll find there'll probably be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws, and that will just slot in over the edge, line it up with the little line up hole that's there. Just there, line it up with the wing, and then it will sit right at the back, and then just attach with these screws.
So like Lewis said there, it's a great tip if you're going to remove that or you're reassembling your car with some new chrome on it. Make sure you leave this piece is what we call the scuttle panel. This piece across the front, leave that till last.
Like so. Don't need to do them up too tightly neither.
So Phil says, how do we get the window chrome off? Phil, good question, because it is the best time to ask, because we can definitely show you those bits at the moment. Adrian says, wish the chap ruined ours, watch this. I'll be honest, Adrian, I didn't say, but I was thinking of you, because yours is a lovely pink. Yours is slightly more, yours is breast cancer awareness pink, isn't it? So it's a little bit pinkier than this one. But yeah, sadly, Adrian's got a beautiful pink paint job. It's the car that was that did the X Factor stuff, did the start of the X Factor, and it's, yeah, the trims could do with replacing, but it's still an amazing car, Adrian, that you're lucky to have. Should we show these guys how to get the chrome off?
The windscreen chrome.
Sorry, was it windscreen chrome? My comments aren't going through at the same speed. Window chrome. So you're talking about this piece along the side here.
Yeah, I've got one attached this side and one.
Perfect, you're the man. So the reason people will be changing this is probably to change these rubbers. So again, that's a rubber we've reproduced because, as you'll probably gather from the theme of my lives each week, I'm a bit obsessive about the way that the chrome and the rubber looks against the body because it makes a difference. But yeah, Louis, do you want to explain on that one, and I'll grab another one out of the box so I can show the guys how it goes together.
Yeah, sure. So how it comes off is this rubber here, be a little bit gentle. If you could tear it, just pull it down all the way. Bring it off from that. And then basically it's undo all the screws that go round the chrome, undo all those, and it will come away. It might be a bit stuck in a corner up here, but just a little bit of pressure and it will pull away. It will pull away fine. And that's that. Just refit it exactly the same way you took it off.
Just like that when it comes out. And then you can just re-stick a new one of these rubbers. So, you know, I was talking a minute ago about the rubber shrinking. So this rubber, I don't think, that's not actually even broken. So that is how much the rubber has shrunk over 28 or whatever years. But yeah, it goes to show how much it, yeah, so if that's how much that shrinks, that's how much all the other bits in the engine bay and the rubber parts on the engine will have shrunk as well. What about, would you want to have a look, guys, at what Lewis has been doing on the dash? Do you want to show us on this, Lewis? Because dashboards are a big job to get in and out. And what you've been doing here is preparing it, isn't it? Do you want to explain the bits on the corner? Because again, that's one of the bits we like to try and get.
Yeah, so the famous Figaro cracked dashboard. What we've done here is we cut two bits of metal to the same shape as the dashboard, and then that's glued onto what's left of the corner of the dashboard.
We'll show you a broken one in a minute.
Yeah, and that's glued to what's left, and then basically we would then add more glue to the bits that are missing and sand it all back down, and then we'll put some filler over the top of it, sand that down so it's nice and flat, and drill the holes for it, and then it looks all original and as good as new. These are just fog light buttons that have been drilled into the dash. We get rid of these and move the fog light, so we flush those in, pretty much the same principle as the metal and the thing, and then it all gets prepped up, painted, and looks as good as new, and then it's all finished.
On this car over here, you can see this is what, before Lewis started that's what it would have looked like. So that's what we're trying to get rid of in there. So Mick, thanks for reminding me, mate. I forgot about that. So Mick asked about the windscreen probe, which is a good one, because if you want it to look really nice, you can. So you see, the reason that you would take this off, we talked about this on one of the other cars. See all this cracking around here? If you want it to look really sharp, you've got two choices. You can either repaint this, or if you've got to change the windscreen, actually, you need to do this as well. But you can either repaint this. You can do it while it's on the car if you mask it all up carefully. But you need to clean this off because it's not really paint. It's like a funny type of thick tape stuff. You can hear it under my nail there. So we normally do it. We'll clean that off with a scalpel, with a little blade. You'd be surprised how much work we end up doing with blades. So we buy boxes and boxes of these little, like razor blade things. And so for something like that, if we were doing it, we'd take all that off with the blade. I won't do it because I'm not sure if this car's having it. And then that would be clean chrome underneath. And then we would etch prime it. Because it's stainless, you've got to be careful to etch prime it. And then we would mask it and repaint it, or we might do it off the car. But Mick needs to know how to get his off. So
yeah, that's fine.
Lewis
So if you come round here. So first place you would start would be just down here. You'd undo this Phillips screw here, and then what will be behind here will be 3 clips that are clipped in the side of the inside of the A post. They're usually quite stiff, so we usually try and get something like this in there to try and sort of pull it away. Obviously this side, not windscreen side. Just pop it away and then it will slide off the end of this cap here. The black trim that's under here that could cause a problem is sometimes the bolts just spin inside the moulding. So if you can pull that one away from the side, and depending on how it's gone, whether you got both of them undone or one of them, you can slide this panel off whichever way is free. And what I recommend with these panels that are usually still stuck on because the bolt's spinning is, again, use one of these underneath the plastic piece just to support it, and then get an electric drill with an 8mm on it, and the 8mm that's located under here, just keep spinning it on the drill and just ease lifting up pressure on the black so that the 8mm there. So on the black trim, if it's just spinning, just keep easing pressure on it, and eventually the captive nut will start heating up the plastic, and it will just burn it through, which means then you can remove it, cut the bolt out if necessary, and then re-put a bolt in the black plastic bit, which is what I had to do to this one. That's usually worst case scenario, taking those off, but the 2 side trims come off like that. The roof trim will slide either way, and then you just use like one of those little tools to pop off the 5 clips that are sat in the middle, and then you reset the clips back in the moulding when you're finished. Put this one back on first, and keep it all loose before you don't clip anything in properly until you've got everything all lined up, and then start slowly clipping it in.
It's a bit like the ones on the wing, isn't it?
Yeah, make sure it's
put them on and then go along and with the back of your fist and knock them in place. The key with those bits, isn't it, is not to, we see so many, sadly we see a lot of cars that go to the big windscreen companies and then they don't know how to remove the trim, and then the car comes to us because the trim never fits again. They're hard enough to fit if you know what you're doing, but whatever you do, if you've got to remove them, or if you go to your windscreen company or your insurance or whatever, I mean ideally if you get a windscreen, get a Figaro specialist to do it, but if you can't, either get them to call us or make sure they know that how these undo from the back and the sides, because otherwise they just try and grunt them, get them off, all this gets bent, and then it never ever fits again, and you get
new ones.
Yeah, you have to buy or replacement ones. So yeah, hopefully you find that useful. Mick says thanks. No worries. I hope you're enjoying the car. Mick owns the West Ham car. We loved building that car. That was one of the longest jobs we ever did.
One of my favourites.
Yeah, every nut and bolt on that car was painted to match the West Ham colours. Any of you guys watching from around the rest of the world, so West Ham's a football club that Mick wanted the car themed after. it's a Marmite car, wasn't it? We were lucky enough to take it to the NEC, to the big classic car show, and people either love it or hate it.
But it was one of my favourite builds.
Yeah, it was a cool car. We love doing ones like that. We're actually doing one this month actually that we'll show you. Maybe we'll have it in paint next week. I think it's in some really unusual colours. It's got like a mohair hood, and I've got a feeling it's like Kawasaki green, like the motorcycle Kawasaki green. You know, the bright illuminacy type green. So yeah, that should be really cool. It's all one off, so we're excited about that. We're getting stuck into it now. We're back. We've got Luke and some of the other guys doing the paint work on that. And the car I was telling you about is not ready this week. The one that's not a Figaro, that you gave me some guesses on what it was. It should hopefully be ready for next week, but that's going to be a good one, guys. It is one of one. We're only building one. It's not a Figaro, but it might be Figaro inspired. And there's one of one, and we are going to be selling it as well, so you'll need to be quick on it. Teddy, you just said, Teddy, we're not quite there. We just need it to be right, and it's just not quite ready. Guys, we've done just over an hour. If anyone's got any more questions, I'd love to hear them. It's fantastic to see you again. I'm going to have to put the Figaro jacket back on just to finish up because it's so cool. I don't know if one of my guys commented on who gave us this jacket, but I'm so proud of it. I wish I had a special. There's no events at the moment, is there? So this is the only event that I get to go to and dress up. But look, how cool is that? I know I showed you before, but look, got all the colours of the Figaros on there. We bought the car and he decided to throw this in, which was really nice. It's silk, made in India. It's lovely. Look, it's got all these really nice pleated pockets. Guys, have a fantastic weekend. Thank you again. It really is the best time in my week. I'm excited from a Friday morning to know that we're going to get to do this on a Friday afternoon. I can't wait to see more of you back at the shop. Peace and love. Have a good weekend.